Thank you. Let's see who's here.
There is one host and 7 participants in this conference.
Okay, 7 of you out there and 2 of us here. We have a serious parking problem in Hermosa Beach this weekend, so only one braved it. She brought her most beautiful friend.
We have one canine friend.
Huh? Yeah, one canine friend, a gorgeous dog. There's bowls in the kitchen if you want to put down water.
Okay.
And the backyard is enclosed if you want to let her outside, him or her.
Okay.
Have access to the backyard.
Maybe I'll let him have some water. He had some a little while ago.
Yeah. Gorgeous dog. Anyway, hi everybody, welcome. And let's see where we go this week. I don't have much stuff. A couple of bullets from the audios this week. On Tuesday, Joel asked the question whether or not we are like most spiritual seekers pursuing truth in order to improve our humanhood. Are we doing this class work and are we listening to the audios and are we doing all of this work just to improve our humanhood, or are we really doing it to achieve self-realization, realize who we really are, which is certainly a much bigger prize than a moderately improved humanhood. So that's an interesting question, and we all start out, of course, driven to the work by a necessity to improve our humanhood. Very few of us just start out looking for God, but the real prize is self-realization, is finding God, is realizing our oneness with oneness itself, and because that's where the infinity of everything is. So you can look at that if you wish, and see what comes to you. And I wanted to mention a little more about the morning tapes. You know, it is not important to get through the morning tape every day. It's much more important to hear something well and take it with you during the day. But I was thinking, we used to at the meditation meeting here tell people, you know, to start by meditating. Start by setting your clock for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, you know, and make sure that you meditated the full 3 minutes every day. And then we said, don't increase the amount of time for meditation, and let it increase itself, and it will, you know. Someday you'll find yourself doing 5, and then someday you'll find you're not done at 5, and you'll move up to 8 or 10. And I'm going to say the same thing about listening to tapes. You don't need to get all the way through the tape, but do try to develop the habit of listening, working with it for at least about 1 hour. And if you need to get up a little earlier in order to find that hour, it would be well worthwhile to do so. And then after you develop the habit of working with an hour, don't worry about trying to increase the time you spend. An hour is plenty to hear a good thing, and it will increase itself. I never tried to expand the time I spent, and now it's just expanded itself because it's the most delicious time I spend all day, so I want to stay there as long as I can. But that happened to me. I didn't do that. So try to find a way to spend an hour each day, and don't worry about hearing the entire tape. Worry about hearing something. And then yesterday or this morning, maybe it was yesterday, he talked about, you know, wanting anything, you know, wanting health, wanting wealth, wanting relationships, wanting anything is defeating our purpose. And I added also, by wanting to help others, we're defeating our purpose. And the reason for that is, if we want something, first of all, the something we want is wanting something other than self-realization, spiritual realization, realization of oneness. Wanting anything else is a function of human consciousness. And this is why this is like trying to improve our humanhood. If we want more supply or better health or anything like that, it's reinforcing our humanhood and our separateness from God. And we need to, and this is a very difficult thing to do, I'm still working very hard at it, we need to back off from wanting things and focus on wanting to realize the presence of God and let God do the work. And letting God do the work. Eventually, the next step up is letting God as us do the work. Realizing our oneness with God, and realizing that God is expressing itself as each of us individually, and letting it do whatever it's expressing itself as us to do, which will include, by the way, the absolute fulfillment of whatever it is expressing itself as us to do. So it's really worthwhile hanging out for that. And that's also the reason wanting to help others is self-defeating, or is purpose-defeating, because if I want to help others, that means I'm separate from God and others are separate from God, and God is over there somewhere, and that's reinforcing the separateness and the opposite of oneness. And then I guess a couple of days ago as well, he said the connecting link with God is the awareness of God. Constant realization of our oneness with God, constant realization of our relationship with God. And that's, that's really the whole thing. If I am not in this moment realizing my oneness with God, then in this moment I am not connecting with God. Now I may have been connecting with God just a minute ago, and right now I may be gliding along pretty well, but if I'm not actively, consciously being aware of the presence of God or abiding in truth or something like that, then I have no active link with God. And this is why the work is so very difficult, and what took me years and years and years to really get. He really means that if I'm not actively realizing something about God, the presence of God, or something about God, or actively working within my consciousness on God, then there is no link to God. So that's something to keep in mind. These are sort of the points that leapt out at me this week during the tapes. The whole point is to realize our oneness with God. Realize that all there is consciousness, all there is oneness, only God is, and God is expressed as all individual being, including you and me and the plants and the beautiful dog and the cockroaches and everything else. God is expressed as all of these creatures, all of these individualizations, but not as we see them, because we're seeing a material sense of them. The point is that all of these beings that we're seeing materially are in fact spiritual beings, and God is expressing itself as each individual being, expressing particular aspects of itself as each individual being, and God is the complete expression of the individual being that you are, is a very harmonious and fulfilled and blissful being. So that's the goal. Self-realization is the goal, and that gets us out of this humanhood loop and into the arena of peace, my peace. And I think that may be the way things go from now on. And if during the week I hear something on the tapes that is worth commenting on, I will do so. Otherwise, these little talk will get shorter and shorter. So I'm going to end now and open the phone line for anybody to share about anything they want to. So jump in, anybody. Assuming there really are 7 people on the phone.
Hey, this is Kate.
Hey, Kate. Thank you.
The whole thing about practicing the presence, I find that I want to do that because to me that's the whole point, because in hanging out with y'all and listening to Joel and doing this for a number of years now, I understand intellectually that anything that I want that I think is outside of myself is essentially shadowboxing in a paper bag. It's like, it's illusory, it's worthless, and it's simply not true. And I find myself just spacing out and going into the old pattern of habit of thinking, well, I'm mad about this because this isn't happening and this person isn't doing this, and then, by grace, I can reel myself back in and say, oh, wait a minute, I need to, practice presence. Okay, this person is God. This situation, is perfect in itself, and sometimes I say through gritted teeth, you are God, but I just find myself kind of caught in a, I don't know if it's a hall of mirrors or like an echo of the old patterns, and I guess is it just reeling ourselves back in as often as we need to, and and just not giving ourselves a hard time and saying, well, I should be better, because there's so much that reinforces the idea that we're separate from God, and yet the whole and plain truth is that everything is one. And I saw that in the dragonfly today, and that was great, but I was still doing it intellectually. I was like, okay, that dragonfly's life is the same life as mine. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't yet feeling it. And when I can get the feeling, it's just so fleeting. So yeah, that's where I'm at today, and yeah.
Yep, and that's where we all are to some degree or another, and none of us are done with that I know of. That's exactly the process. And yes, whenever you if you catch yourself, you reel yourself back in and go back to realizing the true nature of people. This is the deconditioning that we talk about even back in the kid work, deconditioning ourselves by catching ourselves whenever the glitch happens or our kid voice arises, always catching ourselves, and it's a long, slow, lengthy deprogramming process. You've heard Joel talk a lot about inertia, and what you're discussing is the inertia that, however many years old you are of thinking the old way, plus all the lifetimes you did before that, there's a great deal of inertia about thinking the old way, plus, as you say, it's reinforced. We call this in AA, we call it listening to old tapes, the old habits of thinking.
Yeah.
And all you can do is as much as you do. you can't do more. You can't do more than you are doing, which is whenever you notice it, pull yourself back, because if you don't notice it, then you don't notice it, so there's nothing you can do. And the regularity of the practice will increase the frequency with which you catch yourself and pull yourself back, and it'll start taking less time to catch yourself, and you'll start being more in the moment, and all of that will progress slowly, slowly, slowly. And that's sort of the process, and especially hanging out with people like we're doing on this telephone call, getting reminded frequently, that's sort of something that tends to shift our inertia. If you get reminded that of the goals of doing the work, then or the joys of doing the work, then that nudges us a little closer towards doing it. But all we can do is put ourselves in a position where we get these nudges periodically. It's just, it takes what it takes. And I don't know any quick ways to do that, or I would have done it decades ago.
Yeah, I have noticed that in doing the 22-minute practice, I've been doing that so much that I did not have a meltdown this morning. And usually on Sunday mornings I have a meltdown for whatever reason. And I didn't have a meltdown this morning. And it was just so cool. It was quite noteworthy.
Yeah, 22-minute practice is certainly one of the tools we've been blessed with to, that's about as fast a way as we know to deprogram ourselves. Using that for whatever reason we can is a great tool if we can remember to do that.
Yeah, and there's something else I've noticed is when we practice noticing the glitch, that carries over into just recognizing the hypnotism and chub.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's just so cool that it is by and by just blooming in my consciousness, and I'm really grateful.
Yep, and that's the process, and that's what we're doing here, is hanging out long enough and together enough that it is blooming rather than wilting,
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I sure appreciate all of us doing this. Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly what this work is all about, is blooming instead of wilting. My friend Bernie at the AA meeting used to say, if you're coasting, you're going downhill.
No matter how slight the slope.
Okay, so that's true. If you're coasting, you're either losing speed or going downhill. There's no alternative, And so the idea is to not coast as much as you can not coast. Thank you. Yeah, that's the game.
Thank you.
That's the game.
Hey, Lee, it's Karen.
Hi, Karen.
I like, Kate talked about those little nudges, and they've just been showing up, and I just wanted to share about them.
Right.
The other day, Brendan, the one that had the appearance of the ADHD and was on all the meds, every 6 weeks I try to, because there's so many of them, I try to go get one of them early out of school and just spend a little one-on-one time with them. And he got in the car and he had a whole bunch of these awards, and he just looked at me and he said, I know, Mom, it's not you, and it's this work that we're doing. He's like, but it is really amazing. He said, I used to want to kill myself every day and just die. And that was just such sign for me that, you know, this work is working.
Yes.
And, you know, things might show up for me, not as often, but just how, like, these it's just little seeds have gone off into these kids. And the oldest one, there's no doubt in my mind he died with an accident. And now that he started driving, he's had a few hitting the curbs and the tires, you know, get blown, and his reaction is way out of proportion. And I tell him, Jordan, if I have to replace tires every week, I'd rather be doing that. And today was a real one. I was over at Ann's working, getting ready for this tour, and he came over to help with some river rock, and he picked up this table she was giving us, and he was playing around. Well, he tipped it up, the glass broke and shattered everywhere. Mm-hmm. And you could just see him. And you know, of course, Ann and I were both there, and her knowing, you know, being friends of mine, she knows his situation. And we were like, it's an accident, it's good. And he went home, and I just checked on him. And on the way home, I said, are you okay? He's like, I'm good. I said, well, I know that you're saying that, but he's like, I know it's just an accident. And I said, well, it's showing up for a reason, and we'll continue to, you know, work on it. And where did it hit you? And he's like, in my stomach. And, you know, so I try to get them to identify where that glitch, mm-hmm. you know, comes for them. And just as I walked in the door, and I walked out the back, the other one, Brendan, trips over the dog and into a table, and the eyes open, and we're up to the emergency room, and, you know, the poor kid's standing there, and of course, you know, it's death to him because he was in the house and I was outside, and, you know, and I have to take care of, you know, one thing at a time. And it's ironic that the same doctor was there that stitched up the other one 2 months ago. And, you know, and we get on the table, and we can, you know, we go right to that awareness exercise, and I don't have to do it out loud with them. I'll just, you know, just give me your hands and let's focus on your breathing. And, you know, the doctor looked at me when we were done, and he goes, I don't know how you do it. It's not me. And Darren just looked like, you don't even want to know. It's just, you know, it's just a connection that me and the kids have.
Yeah.
And it was funny because on the way home, I said, "So what did you hit?" He goes, "I think the table, but really, isn't it all just an illusion?" And I just, oh my gosh, you know, I got 7 stitches in you, so. But you know, I had to come home. Or I didn't have to, but I came home and I had to work with the oldest one because, again, now the table and the kids getting stitches, and I said, we'll just work on it. You know, it's showing up for a reason.
Yep.
You know, so those are just, I mean, I don't know, for me, I get so excited when these things show up with the kids. It's like, yay, you know, if they bring home a note from school, I'm like, awesome. It's an opportunity to sit and talk with my kids.
Yeah. See, that's so wonderful. That's so wonderful. And it'll make such a big impact on their lives, you know, their future. Thinking this way at the ages that they're at now, you know, they're already doing the deprogramming in spades that we're struggling with, you know, after an additional 20 or 30 years of going in the wrong direction, you know?
Yeah, I agree, but Lee, sometimes I tell Ann, sometimes when these moments happen and these things come out of my mouth, it's like almost an outer body experience. That's just like, who are you?
Yep, that's right. And the answer is, that's who you are. Not the one who's asking, who are you, but the voice that comes out of your mouth. That's who you are, see? That's the presence of God.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. That's the presence of God delivering what's necessary in the moment for this moment. And it happens all the time once you're living in this, or working on living in this consciousness more and more. So yeah, that's Joel's entire talk is like that. Joel doesn't ever choose a word to say. His entire talks are just, words coming out of his mouth, and you're touching that too now, which is wonderful.
Okay. So can you repeat that one more time?
I just said that when these words come out of your mouth, that's your real self, that's your higher self, that's God producing the appropriate words. I mean, you are one with oneness, and what's behind you, backing you up, is the entire consciousness, the infinite wisdom and intelligence of God. So it certainly can be available to you, and now it's becoming available to you.
Okay. Did you happen to see my question that I emailed?
Which email was that?
I sent you a question about last week's tape. There was a little bit of discussion about author and authorship.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't picked up my email in a couple of days, so I'll look and see if it's there. But or you can ask the question right now. Go ahead.
Well, there was some discussion about author and authorship, and let me see exactly.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay, let me read it. Okay. The first question was, you were talking about the healing consciousness, and you referenced Robert Adams, Adishante, Nat Khan, and Joel. That there is a self, is dissolved into the universe, that was no personal self, where they lost their identity. Humanhood is how I understood it. And my question was, do you feel that Byron Katie was a person that had that experience of complete loss of self?
I only met Byron Katie once, and I looked into her eyes, and I know she's the real deal, but I have no idea what her experience was like. I don't believe that Adishante or Robert or Joel had that experience as totally as Robert, but it's different for everybody, and I have no way of knowing what happened with Byron Katie. She sure got cooked somewhere, I know that. I looked into her eyes for a few minutes one time, and boy, it was neat.
Okay, yeah, because I'm not too familiar with Robert Adams, because that's who you had referenced. I know you had said that Joel and Adishante hadn't, but so I was just wondering, being sort of new in that.
They both had huge self-realization experiences, but you got to understand that there's all sorts of levels of consciousness, with and there's all sorts of levels for people who are still wearing bodies. Jesus and Buddha and Krishna were probably at 1,000 according to Hawkins, but you can have an enlightenment experience, you can have the mystical experience and totally realize your oneness with God, and still be at like anywhere above 600, 700, 800, and the Advaita Vedanta people, the master of their group for several years was a 731, as I recall that Hawkins said. So there's all different ranges, and Robert, I have no idea what his score was, because, like I said, he got completely blown away, and there wasn't any Robert there, and he never thought there was a Robert there, and he did not have the healing consciousness. So here again, they're all different, and you can't know what their experience was. Joel doesn't talk a lot about his experience, but we do know that he got the healing in his experience. He got the healing consciousness in that one experience. 2 days later, he was doing healing work, and he did not know how he was doing it or what the principles were. And a year or so later, he was trying to learn how to meditate. So that shows you that he came in at a different level. So I don't know. Can't know.
Okay. The second one was last week. I think Joanne was sharing, and she referenced the word author and authorship.
Right.
And there was a little discussion about that all there is God, but there is no God in the human experience.
Right.
And then I think you said, there was no authorship. So I wasn't clear on that word of how it was being referenced as far as author or authorship.
Okay, yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. That's a word that Wayne Lickerman, who's part of the Advaita Vedanta crowd, he's a Advaita teacher, he uses the word authorship. You could just as easily say, do you think you're the doer? And the point is, when I do an activity, let's be really simple about it. If I get up from the chair, who initiated the getting up from the chair? Lee or God as Lee? Who was the author of the getting up from the chair? And who was the doer? Who made the decision? And a lot of the discussion, and we can get into this sometime if you want to, but the real question is whether or not there really exists anything as free will, anything that we call free will. And although the answer seems obvious that we do have free will, there are a lot of very, very, very high people who say that's not true, including, Wayne certainly would be one of them, and Joel essentially said that on the tape I was listening to the other day, and Robert Adams certainly did not think anybody had free will, but of course there was no Robert Adams, so he didn't know anybody that could have free will. So, there's an equally valid question about whether or not we are in fact the doers of anything, or if we're really God acting as us all the way, and that's we really ought to discuss spend a whole class on that rather than just nibbling at it, because that's a very complicated topic. But the authorship means doership. Are you the doer? Did you initiate that activity, or was it initiated through your body, through you, or as you? That's what we're talking about.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lee.
And just to give you one hint, Ramana Maharshi, the great Indian saint, Robert told me that Ramana Maharshi one time, and when they were talking about this, raised his hand up in the air and put it back down. And he said, I did not raise that hand. The raising and lowering of that hand was decided before I came into this body. So he was absolutely denying any power of free will within himself.
Okay.
And I used to ask Robert about it, and he would always smile at me and say, who has the free will? Who would have the free will? And that's the question that brings it into focus for me. You know, in order for me to have free will, in order for there to be free will, someone has to have that free will. And if there is no self other than God, then the one who has the free will would have to be God, and that sort of makes the whole thing very interesting, don't you think?
Yeah.
But that was Robert's question. He never made an answer at all. He just looked at me and smiled and said, who would have the free will? And I think that's a very fair question.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Floor is open. Anybody?
I guess I'll share.
Okay.
Cynthia. It's interesting. I was just thinking about even what to tie into the last couple things, or just about the free will, and I was thinking about the way Matt Kahn answers that, which is kind of, his language is so different, but more or less when people have asked him about choices and how we, that there's different outcomes, and he said, but there's really, and I don't know if this is the same thing as not having everything being pre-decided, but that's the way that I kind of took it, and I thought it was interesting because he's kind of a little bit more, he talks about the Akashic records and that intuition, and but he said that there might be things that happen in between or something like that, but basically the final thing, the choice or the decision is already done, or it's already written, he says, in the Akashic records, whatever that is. So I think that kind of ties into the same thing, right? He's saying the same thing, more or less.
I think so, and what's happening is very clearly each of us individually is unfolding some aspect of God, and that's going to be successful, and omni-activity is about the unfolding of that aspect of God, and the variation on the straight unfolding is of course the presence of Chub. So but still it's God is revealing itself to itself individually, and there's not a lot of there's nobody else there to be making decisions, in spite of the fact that it looks like that to us.
Maybe there was something, along that lines that he said about decisions. It might look like that, or something like that.
It certainly looks like it. It certainly looks like it. We'll all swear that we're making decisions all the time. David Hawkins was asked that at the lecture I was at down in Long Beach. Somebody asked him, is there free will? And his answer is, not as you think of it. Which means not the humanhood free will. And he didn't go any further into that. I wish he had. Interesting.
Is he still around? Did he pass?
He passed.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. A few years ago now.
So let's see. What was I going to share? A couple things. I love hearing about the work, and I probably would maybe want to hear more about that. How that it's being done with, the script work. And I guess I know the script work, and I could apply that. But I really feel like I need to start. I mean, I don't know. Well, I woke up to hear. I keep waking up hearing Joel talk about kids for whatever reason, and I've been really feeling like I want to give my son more. I know the best thing is to model, but maybe some of these tools, as far as maybe even introducing the, some of the basic stuff. I don't know how much you can understand as far as too, but as far as maybe the glitch and that kind of thing, I definitely think that, I have so many tools and I want to be able to, I've showed him different, we sit and meditate a little bit, but he usually doesn't want to. He used to love to do it when he was little, but now he's kind of like resistant to anything Mom, suggests and that I'm doing. But we've chanted a little together and I've showed him the breathing, but I feel like I want to give him, I love hearing about the other share about the kids and how they're, picking up on that. But I have been feeling like, I remember, and I think Joel talks about this too, and this is another one I woke up hearing him talk about. The biggest thing that you can do is, your kids are going to be a reflection of what you're living in your home and in your life, and kids are never going to believe you if you're living a lie or you're telling them a lie or whatever, and that they're going to believe what they, basically what you're modeling. So that's really been making me think about what am I showing, and Paul used to say, if your house, I remember when he first came here and people would ask him questions about their family and the kids, and he's like, well, if your house is peaceful, your kids are going to be peaceful. So I've really been trying to bring that peace, into the house. He woke up early today, before I even had meditated or done anything, and I just can't start I want the tablet, I want you to make, and I'm like, I need my, hopefully that's modeling, I need my quiet time, I have to start off my day this way.
Yeah.
You got up really early today, so you can go occupy yourself before we do, breakfast and everything.
Perfect.
And so he sees that. He'll probably remember that, like, oh, Mom always has her quiet time or whatever.
He will, yeah.
And he knows what that looks like. He knows it's silent and it's quiet.
And that it's important to you.
Right, that I make it a priority above even eting,
That's important. Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to pay attention to what that's, but that inertia, I felt that a lot, like this, this today, or just in general, I feel that more, that inertia, how hard it is to, or it has been for me, it's been easy to get into the inertia and slip into the human consciousness and not wanting to do work and not wanting to, the resistance has been a lot. And being down at the Hermosa Street Fair, I could feel it. I'm just like, I can only handle so much of this.
Yeah.
I could feel just the, human consciousness and how I just start getting uncomfortable. And if I spent a day in that, the whole day, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's actually oppressive, isn't it?
Yes. And I think that's what the couple days this week, I woke up feeling very depressed. And I'm like, what is going on? And today it came to me, because I was feeling a little bit above that after I listened to a little Joel. And I thought, that wasn't mine. I don't think that what I've been feeling, it's just not doing enough work to keep me above that level. Or maybe I guess depression can be kid work too,
But quite possibly it wasn't yours, if there's a, like when those 2 high school kid shootings went down, that was clearly in the consciousness, it affected a lot of people, and I'm sure there were people that were scared and nervous and everything before they knew what had happened, It's in the consciousness. There's only one consciousness, and it's in it. It's in there, and I'm sure you do a lot of work. I'm sure that you pick up on that. And
yeah, I think that's part of it. Is if I get tuned into whatever, because what's being radiated out there is not pretty if I'm like that level.
That's right. So you remind yourself that that's them, and I'm me. I'm God. Yeah.
I found myself, and maybe this is, I don't know, I found myself talking to somebody yesterday, a mom friend. I had 5 kids over, plus the 2 parents, and this particular mom is very tuned into, I would say, human consciousness and being, and this is, I'm saying this in the most, she just is one that wants to save everything and everyone, that kind of mentality, and I totally get it, like every cause, I guess, and so she likes to talk about the causes or the things that are happening in the world, which is challenging for me, very challenging for me to hear. Before it was, what the vaccines and the nutrition and what the world, we're being poisoned by our food, and now granted I do make healthy choices in food, but I don't make it a cause.
Right.
And then we got into talking about all the Pope and how he's resigning and all the priests and all the child abuse And she was getting into detailed stories about what's happening to all these kids. And I just find, I mean, it's hard for me to hear that stuff anyways, just because of whatever. I mean, I don't want to hear it, and it makes me uncomfortable. But I found myself listening, and then I'm like, and I think she's starting to get introduced to a little bit of, you know, where she knows. She's like, I know that there's, you know, we can operate at our own vibration. But I said, you know what, I can't hear anymore. I finally said that, and I don't know, and I think that it, you know, maybe she felt a little, seemed like it, I don't know, it was okay, but I don't know how to handle myself in that situation. I was trying to remember truth, and then she started asking me about good and evil and why these things exist, and I found myself that I really don't know how to answer that. So whatever feedback we could get on that. I found myself in situations, especially around other moms, a lot in those kind of things, where a lot of stuff's being thrown out there. And it's usually not very positive.
It's very difficult.
And I don't want to alienate people either.
Right, and they're doing the best they can, and they're being very kind, and they're trying to help, and they're, you know, Joel talks about, you know,
do-gooders.
Doctors, yeah, he talks about do-gooders, you know,
right.
Those are the people that are trying to avoid looking at themselves, but, you know, I mean, like a doctor is helping people at the level he operates at, you know, building hospitals, you know, giving money to help people build hospitals in Zimbabwe, you know, is a very real, kind, conscientious, thoughtful thing to do for somebody who's operating at that level, you know, and you can't tell people that, you know. I run into that, and I go down to Java Man every morning, and there's a couple of guys that like to have coffee with me, and they're very into reading the paper and doing all that sort of stuff, you know, and I usually just don't say anything, you know. Certainly don't try to teach them or correct them or straighten them out. I usually just don't say anything, and when it's enough, I let them know it's time for me to hit the road, you know.
So you just remove yourself. So maybe that should have been something. Well, she was at my house, so I couldn't really remove myself.
Yeah. And
so you tried to be as polite as possible without making it about them. Maybe.
I'm also very careful about who's in my house.
Right. That's true.
You know, I mean, there are very few people that can spend the night here, you know.
Right.
I don't take in house guests unless they're pre-vetted, you know. I mean, I don't want that in my house, you know, the closeness of it. So we do the best we can. And you love them for wanting to help, you know.
Well, that's the thing. Part of me is like, well, maybe I'm the one because I don't get involved in that. But I thought, well, at least she's out there. Like, she does all these causes for the vaccine.
But it's not working.
Right.
But it's not working. They're not affecting any of the things they're trying to help. You know, all this activism doesn't work. That's
my intuitive feeling. That's why and I hear Joel say that. And
it doesn't. It's been going on for 4,000 years, you know, and we don't have peace, you know. It doesn't work. And an hour by yourself silently meditating does work. Or 5 minutes does work, you know. But the time you spend knowing truth actually alters the content of consciousness, and there's only one consciousness, so the time you spend knowing truth alters consciousness itself, and by altering consciousness you are changing experience, because consciousness and experience are the same thing, you know. So, you know, I mean, silent meditation or medication, silent meditation or doing Ho'oponopono or things like that are things that help. Whereas spending all your energy out there being an activist doesn't.
Well, it's funny because I woke up this morning, I thought, what could be the one thing I could say to her that might help her? Because I could tell she wants answers and she's seeking.
Yeah.
And I thought, maybe it just came to me, I thought maybe suggesting, you know, because she's like, well, what, I don't understand. Is suggesting maybe start with 5 minutes a day of meditation. That's how the biggest thing you can do to help.
Yeah.
And see, and I thought that came to me today, so that's interesting.
Yeah, and that would open up a conversation with her.
Right.
Because you can't teach anybody about good and evil without being able to teach them, you know, about consciousness and, you know, about mystical experiences. Most people don't want to hear that. You know?
Well, I said, well, you know, good and evil, yeah, there is. It's really about, you know, I said a couple little things And I realized that, I'm not going to do this.
And that's all you can do, You answer the question honestly. My general rule is I answer the question honestly and as minimally as I can. And then wait to see if there's a follow-up question before I go any deeper. And I make them lead me to whatever depth they want to work at. And if they want to walk away, fine. But I certainly don't feel the need to enlighten anybody. But yeah, that's the world.
Hi, Lee, it's Patty.
Hi, Patty.
Hi. I'm glad Cynthia brought that up, so thank you.
Let me just say one thing real quick before you go on. Karen,
Okay.
Karen and Ann are very interested in bringing script and kid work to children. So that was Cynthia talking, Karen, so you guys might connect. And also Bridget Gallagher up in Washington has two sons who are, one of them's a guru, a very young guru who helps her with her kid work, and the other one is, but she has a lot of experience there, so I'm thinking that Karen and Ann may wind up putting together a script and kid work for children, and I'm suggesting that they add Cynthia and Bridget to their list. Now,
That would be great. I was going to ask her, about that. So that would be, I'd be really interested in that.
and then there's one of Joel's ladies that did all the kid work.
Eileen Bowden?
Yes,
I have that book. I still haven't read it. My son's 8 years old, but Awakening, I've read part of it, but about Awakening Your Child to Truth, I think it's called, or something.
I haven't read it either, but that's the only other source I know is that Joel always referred to Eileen when he talked about children. Now go ahead, Patty. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to...
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah,
I'd like to be added to that, too.
Yeah, I wanted to... Yes, of course you do. Yes, Patty
Yeah.
has to be on that. That's an important list, and I know that... I know that amazing kid work, script and kid work can be done with children because of a lady I knew in Australia named Judith who actually taught script work to groups of kids. So go ahead, please.
Yeah. I feel like I live that every day. I live with that.
Sure
And what happens for me is I end up getting my script read because I already have this, not belonging rejection kind of script anyway. So then when I don't participate in that, and that comes up every day with my kind of work, the causes and the do-gooding and all that kind of stuff, it ends up, my kid feels more alienated from people. So the struggle is real for my kid every day with that.
Yeah, of course
So
it is.
Appreciate it's validating to hear that others, the whole motherhood thing and all that. And what else was I going to say? I recently had some other things you were saying got me thinking too about this client that I had the other day who really caught me off guard. He was very calmly told me that he was hearing voices and had been for a while telling him to kill people and telling him very descriptive, directive ways to do it. And my first reaction was, I just don't want any part of this right now. This is just not my thing. And then I started having this conversation in my head about, well, you shouldn't feel this way. I mean, you can probably help this person. And then I thought, this is bullshit. Like, I don't have to do this, which I thought at the time was real progress for me because, it was the kid work. Like you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do or you don't feel prepared to do. And so I went with that decision and explained to our director that I just did not feel comfortable And then, of course, I went through the guilt, a little bit of guilt with it, or, that seems to be my theme lately, where a script has been coming up for me. And so when I heard you talking, I thought, maybe it just wasn't, I'm not clear if it was a kid or if it was, like you were saying, like it's just not something I'm willing to or feel like I want to be around or that I want near me. Like how do you know the difference?
Yeah, it's all, and it's all different levels and all different for everybody different. And what you have to do is go within yourself and find out what your motivation is in doing that, and find out whether it's kid or what. The question is find out who's the voice that's saying that, and find out what your motivation is. Ideally, I think, usually when I'm wind up in a conversation like that, here we are in the non-authorship. I don't initiate any comments, but you can't do this, of course, in your professional situation. But in my case, what works is I don't say anything. I don't intend to say anything. I have no intention of straightening them out or correcting them or anything like that. And occasionally I find that I say something, and I think that's something being said through me. And when that happens, it's invariably appropriate. So if we can find our center and let Spirit itself find the words, then that's the ideal situation. But we have to be very much in spiritual adult at the time in order to do that. And we have to be consciously in spiritual adult, which is the other reason I enjoy sitting with these people, because it keeps me consciously working, reminding myself, listening. I'm constantly aware that I'm listening to Chubb, not to these people. And the other thing is I'm constantly aware that I'm listening to Chubb. I'm not listening to what these individuals believe. I'm listening to what Chubb is saying through them. Okay?
Yeah.
So, you find where they're at on that, and if you don't feel like doing it, if you don't feel like doing it, and it's not a kid trying to escape, then trust yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's an important understanding. Joel would just know that was God, and the voice he was hearing was Chubb talking through him, and would have handled it, with a spiritual healing. But I'm certainly not any.
And that was a good indicator to me that I'm nowhere near Joel.
Yeah, me either. I would not undertake that.
I don't know. It was a very humbling experience, because I thought, usually I'm like, I'm doing pretty well, and then my work, I'm constantly faced with things like this, and it's very humbling, because I'm like, wow, I've got a lot of work to do. Yeah. But on the other hand, I'm faced with a lot of challenging situations too.
And we all have a lot of work to do, and each opportunity like that brings us a little closer to it. So it's part of your growth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let me just tell you, I talk about the inertia. I slacked off, and I can tell you firsthand, it's very easy to lose conscious contact. Well, it was very easy for me, and I felt like I was at square one. I really did.
Yeah.
And it was shocking how quickly I got there.
Yeah.
And so I related to all that too, and I find it's like exercise. Once you slack off, it's not easy to, like I'm meditating for 20-25 minutes, and then I get off track, and it's like 3 minutes seems hard when I try to get back into it. So I'm trying to work my way back now, and I definitely don't want to be there again.
Yeah. It's true, it's just the pressure outside of us, the pressure on consciousness, in consciousness, in our consciousness, that from the outside is huge. And
yeah.
So So we have to really be alert, and I think it's probably, it's there's twice as many people now as there were when Joel was teaching 60 years ago, so the pressure is probably 4 times as great, so because all that kind of stuff goes up with the square of the number, so it's harder now, I think, and yet here we are in this class, which means that God has us on the path for unfoldment or fulfillment or stuff like that. The fact that we're all here talking about this means that we are clearly on the path to become self-realized. And, this class is part of the Omni activity. So, it is happening. And the other thing is, once you do catch yourself and go back to work, it comes back pretty quickly, although not immediately. It takes a real workout for the first 2 or 3 days, but then you get the muscle you built is still there, sort of. But it's a lot easier to stay in shape than it is to get back in shape.
Yeah. And when you were talking about, like the causes, and were you talking about like donating money to causes too? Because I thought in some of the Joel tapes I've heard him talk about, he refers to, like not just, he gives an example, like not just helping your kids go to college, but the kids up the street.
Yeah. He definitely supports helping. Giving to charity. He very clearly supports giving to charity. Why wouldn't you? Here are a bunch of people who are trying to help, and whether or not their helping is raising the level of consciousness, it's at least alleviating suffering. And what's wrong with alleviating suffering?
Okay.
So, the old idea of tithing 10% of your income to, general causes, of spiritual causes, or, I'm inclined to help with places like the Midnight Mission downtown in Los Angeles, where all the drunks go, because I had that experience, and I'm also inclined to help with the food bank, just because being hungry ain't fun, Why wouldn't you help alleviate suffering? I can't imagine why you wouldn't do that. So, even though it's not having a significant impact on the content of consciousness, my knowing what I'm doing is when I do it, and also it may be freeing up somebody, when they're hungry, they're not able to do much spiritual work. So, but it might be, the fed person might be able to move forward. I don't know. I don't know how all that works. And it feels good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hell, it's almost 4 minutes. Let's just keep going. We don't need to take a break. It doesn't look like it. Let's keep on until we're done.
Hi, Lee, it's Charlene here.
Hi, Charlene.
Just following up a little bit with what Patty was saying, listening to her client. Is that, and not wanting to listen to the exact words and that sort of thing, and yet what I understood, Patty, is that you are looking at your motivation, you check with your advisor, and you're doing your own work around that. Is that what we've been calling the Ho'oponopono? That you're actually in consciousness doing the work with the client, but you're doing your own work. I don't know if I'm using the proper wording for it all, but that's what I was getting out of Patty's share at the first there.
Yeah, but the important thing is that her client wanted her to work with her client, and Ho'oponopono is more like infinite way healing. Certainly it is not working with the client with regard to the client's issue. It's just like spiritual healing. We don't heal anybody, we heal ourselves, and that's Ho'oponopono. So,
in something like that, is it that you lessen the time with the person and more time with in your own healing?
Well, whatever you're led to do, Joel accepts calls for healing, but spends as little time with the client as possible, which is not something you can do in a psychologically therapeutic way. But Joel wasn't dealing in a psychological environment, and Joel would get rid of the person as quickly as possible. You maybe give them 1 minute to say what their problem was, and then he'd say, "Leave it with me, I'll take care of it," and get him out the door, and get quiet and go within himself, and that's where the healing takes place. But if you're a professional in a counseling situation, you can't. That's not an option.
Right. And I guess that's my own personal experience was the more I was in a job that asked me to do things that went against my consciousness, I couldn't stay in the job as it was.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's what
I agree with
comes
that.
a sort of full circle. The other question was my thinking is around from last week with healing and having a healing, people who have a healing consciousness. With respect to the infinite way, when there is nothing to heal, is it such that the mystic who heals, in quotes, that they're raising someone else's consciousness?
Yes.
We've been talking about the like Robert Adams and that didn't heal, and yet at some level they must have been healing the soul at the soul level, raising the person's consciousness.
Oh yeah, and I don't know. I don't have any clarity on that, but it just looks different.
Yes. So, yeah. Okay. I guess I'm just sorting through our choice of using the healing and healing looking like a physical healing rather than a wholeness healing. And I believe there's healing going on at some level.
Yeah. Or revealing, I like the word revealing better than healing, and
revealing.
And
that's good to have that reminder. Thank you for revealing.
Yeah, because that's what's really happening, and certainly what Joel did was he's very clear that he goes within himself until he's risen to a altitude where he has absolutely no concern about the problem, and in doing so, the person who has connected themselves with his consciousness is also lifted to that altitude, and so the appearance dissolves, appears to disappear. So that's the process.
Well, thank you.